You are listening to a Beach Glass Media podcast.
Great news! One of the world's worst fascist dictators has been captured and has been sent to New York to stand trial against we the people of the United States of America. That's right, folks. A fascist dictator who has been terrorizing Americans for years has finally been captured and set to stand trial. It is miraculous, to say the least, that this quick arrest was made, and it is unbelievable to witness all the citizens of this fascist dictator's regime are now out celebrating in the streets and waving their country's flag, because there's nothing worse than a fascist dictator ruining the lives of its citizens, depleting the nation of its wealth, all the while its citizens go hungry every night, just waiting for a hero to save the nation from the everlasting hellish nightmare of living under an oppressive fascist regime. Of course, we are talking about Nicolas Maduro. Who else did you think I was talking about? Donald Trump or something? Why would you ever think that? I mean, you still have freedom of speech in this country, right? Yeah. This isn't Canada or England where you can be arrested for a Facebook post just for, slightly making unkind and mean and not nice comments. I mean, there are countries out there where you can be incarcerated simply for stating some opinions. I mean, come on. Have we all forgotten that saying that, the one that we learned in elementary school? The one that goes something like, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will cause serious psychological damage, creating undisputable trauma, which will, in turn, then cause you to enroll into years of therapy and may or may not help, depending on if you yourself are willing to do the painstaking work, which you may or may not want to do, because on one hand, the therapist needs your money so they can pay their rent, and you wouldn't want them to be homeless. But on the second hand, going to therapy gives you a friend to talk to, albeit an expensive friend. But, oh great, you missed a session. So now, instead, you decide to take the hatred you have for your father by going out to protest in the streets for, the new flavor of the day cause, because let's face it, you don't have a job, and getting paid to protest at least gets your blood flowing and gives those muscles in your legs that you forgot you had some work to do at least. And, wait, hold on. Where was I? Oh yeah, Trump is not a fascist. How do we know that, you ask? Well, he hasn't offed Jimmy Kimmel. In other news, last week the world witnessed, or should I say, those who spend way too much time on the internet witnessed, a proud mom of 3, Renee Good, decided it was a good idea to, instead of putting her family first, put criminal immigrants first by trying to see what happens when you put the pedal to the metal towards a law enforcement officer after obstructing them from doing their job, since we all know cars don't kill people. I mean, we all know when a police officer, for example, is pulling someone over for speeding, our first instinct is to drive the police officer off the side of the road in order to let the speeder go free. Because we all know cars don't kill people. I mean, please, don't tell me you're an imbecile and actually allow law officers to do their job. You can't be serious. You mean to tell me you actually want police to pull over reckless drivers on the road while you, like an ignoramus, follow the laws of the road? Next, you're going to tell me we should lobby to change the laws so that driving over police officers with your car should be illegal. Oh, please, you loser. We all know cars don't kill people. But in all seriousness, the real losers from the killing of Renee Good by the ICE officers in Minnesota is, in fact, the children. Yes, the children of Renee Good, because they will have to live the rest of their lives knowing that, their mom was killed for simply obeying the commands of her lesbian lover who said, "Drive, baby, drive, drive, drive," when the officer was directly in front of her car. And then driving straight into the ICE officer and learning the hard way that you can't just drive into law enforcement officers and expect to survive because, well, we all know cars don't kill people, but law enforcement believes cars do kill people for some strange reason. So, sadly, the kids lose their mom, but hopefully, and we can always hope, that the lesbian partner would fall in love with another lesbian who would happily take the kids in as her own and possibly support their educational and academic career by enrolling them into the Somali-operated Leering Center. Yes, I said leering, not learning, because, well, I read the sign with my own eyes, which just so happens to also be in Minnesota. But the question is, what woman in Minnesota would be willing to start a lesbian relationship with a woman who just lost her partner due to a shooting incident with an ICE officer? Maybe someone who could be a stay-at-home mom, perhaps? Must be someone with Trump derangement syndrome, that's for sure. Oh, I know. Yes. It just struck me like lightning. I know what woman would be perfect for this widow. And this person just dropped out of the race for governor of Minnesota. What woman am I talking about, you ask? Why, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz. My name is Andrew Reyes, and this is Faith and Politics with me, Andrew Reyes. All right, welcome back to the podcast and Happy New Year. This is, in fact, the first episode of 2026, episode 20. Can you believe it? Because I can't. But first, I want to say a quick thank you to some of my coworkers who have been telling me they've been listening to this podcast because, well, I appreciate your positive feedback. It encourages me to keep doing this. Now, I know this podcast isn't for everyone because it's controversial for some reason, but you know what? You know what's not controversial? Talking about what you actually think, believe, or have faith in. So that's why this podcast exists. And if you want to reach out to me with any questions or comments, feel free to send me a line. Email me at faithandpoliticsandrew@gmail.com, or better yet, follow the Instagram podcast show because, you could send me a DM over there if you want to reach out to me. Also, this show's on YouTube. You can drop a comment somewhere there, or wherever you listen. I will respond to it on the following episode. And, I'll put all those details in the, show notes, all the information that I just said. So just look for in the show notes. But enough with the small talk. Let's dive into today's episode called Episode 20, Immigration Frustration. Okay, before I begin, I just want to quickly mention that I'm probably going to change the format of the podcast just a little bit moving forward. Same podcast, same mission, just going to switch things up a little bit. I used to have the satire at the top of the show, then a faith section, then a political section, but I think I'm just going to blend the sections into one thing somehow. I mean, we'll see. I'm still trying to figure it out. Just bear with me while I'm under construction. So, immigration frustration. Yes. I've actually wanted to put this episode out for about a year now, actually, because that's when I noticed the immigration conversation started up again, right before and after Donald Trump was inaugurated into the office last year, for the presidency. Some might say it was the main issue why Trump won in 2024, and as we witnessed, it was one of Trump's first executive orders. It was an executive action, in fact, and he kept his promise to the American voters, which was to close the border, which was interesting to me because in the previous administration, Joe Biden put Kamala Harris in charge of the border during his presidency, and she pretty much did nothing at all about the border. And I remember Biden's claim was, it's up to Congress to fix the issue. It's got to, pass the House and the Senate, all this and that, which he basically, to me, he acknowledged, hey, there is an issue at the border, but then he claimed there was nothing he could do about it. And then Trump takes office, and then what do you know? Bada bing, bada boop. The border is pretty much immediately fixed. So what did we learn from this? Well, turns out sometimes all you really need to fix a border crisis from time to time is simply a new president. And that's just my short rendition of the issue. But what's the bigger issue or issues of an open border? Well, drugs were flowing in like it was going out of style. Human trafficking, sex trafficking, migrant gangs coming through. Young girls getting raped, Americans getting killed. I mean, the list goes on. Just a lot of bad stuff that the average American does not want happening in their own backyards. So everyone can agree that Trump fixing the issue at the border was a good thing. Now, let me add to that. I need to be specific on how I phrase that phrase. I should be precise. Trump fixing the issue at the border is a good thing because it is ongoing. And it's a good thing for who? The world? No. For Americans. Yes. The people the president works for. And I think that's the political dilemma we are seeing nationwide currently. There's all these protests happening. People are protesting ICE, which is, immigration and customs enforcement. But yeah, you see the headline news. Oh, there was an ICE raid here, and they're taking the sweet little abuela and throwing her in the back of a car, and who knows where she's going. So, you see all these headlines in the news. But before I get into all of that, about how ICE is being treated in the media and how Democrats are calling ICE officers domestic terrorists and all that, let me backtrack and explain as best as possible where I'm coming from with this issue. Let me explain my immigration frustration. What is so frustrating to me about all of this? Because if I could describe my thoughts, they're a bit convoluted, and I'm trying to make sense of it all. And this is why I do this podcast. So many of you listening, the 5 of you, I don't know. I honestly don't know who's listening, but if you are listening, thank you. Thank you for listening. So those of you listening, you know me, or at least, when you click on my podcast, you see my last name on this podcast, and you may wonder, wait, Andrew, aren't you Hispanic? Aren't you Latino? Aren't you an immigrant per se? Aren't you afraid of being profiled and getting deported? Or, hey, Andrew, aren't you from an immigrant family? So how could you support what's going on in this country? What are your views? What are your thoughts? You have this political podcast. Well, it's political. I mean, politics, it's how people come together to figure out how they're going to live with one another. And then, of course, the faith part about it is, how can you morally make these judgment calls or have these opinions? And that's what I'm going to try to get to. So just bear with me here. But yeah, you're wondering, Andrew, aren't you an immigrant? Aren't you Hispanic? What do you think about all this? Well, I'm going to try to answer all those questions to you very carefully, because I will admit I have given all of this a lot of thought, especially in the last year since Trump was inaugurated. And I started seeing all the ICE raids throughout the country, and I had to think critically about all of it. And I had to figure out, where I land on these political issues. As I've stated in the past, like I said, the reason I do this podcast is, first, it's an exercise for me to see what I really think. I heard an author say, if you want to know what you actually think, then write. So with this podcast, I carefully write down everything that I want to say, because it helps me piece together my thoughts in a careful way. Because if I don't, I feel like I would, go off on all kinds of tangents and not get to the point, kind of like how I'm doing right now. But I try my best to make these thoughts out loud on my own. And I want these thoughts to be my own, because what I tend to see on social media is, people repost other people's ideas, and that's fine and all. But I would rather sit down and talk to people about the hard issues. And I think we could find some common ground, which, goes without saying. That's kind of Charlie Kirk's thinking about all that. And I think he was right about that. I think that was a good philosophy that he had. So let me answer some of those questions. And these are currently my personal thoughts. So here we go. First question. Andrew, aren't you an immigrant? Such an interesting question, I'll admit. I'd rather not give a yes or no answer, so allow me to elaborate and explain. I, personally, am not an immigrant, meaning I did not travel to this country from another country, nor do I claim citizenship to a different country from the one I'm currently living in. I was born here in the U.S., in Southern California. It's all I've known. It's where I've dwelled for 37 years now. And I've never lived anywhere else. And I've seen so many changes in development in the South Bay, where I can now say things like, oh, I remember when there used to be a Circuit City over there, and this used to be a bowling alley, and oh, this used to be a miniature golf place, I could say old people stuff like that now. So technically, no, I'm not an immigrant. I was born here in the United States, and my citizenship is for the U.S., and my citizenship has never been for any other country, ever. Facts, as the young people say. But Andrew, what about your parents? Yep. Yeah, that's a whole different story. One that I don't know all the details quite right, to be honest. However, I've pieced together fragments of the stories that I've heard from my parents about coming to the U.S. from El Salvador, and I've learned a lot about my family's history throughout the years. So I might get some details wrong here and there, but I at least understand the basic story. My dad came over to the U.S. while he left my mom and older brother in El Salvador. And, as many do, he came to the U.S. looking for work and a better life for his family. My dad mentioned to me not very long ago that the living situation he was in when he grew up in El Salvador, it was pretty rough. It was something along the lines of gangs taking over portions of the town, to the point where you were forced to pay a tax to the gang in order to exit or enter the town, and in return be offered protection from rival gangs or something of that nature. Once again, I may have some details wrong, but nonetheless, a living situation like that would not surprise me to learn that people would want to flee criminal gang-run territory like that. I, for one, would not want to raise children in that kind of environment. So, for that reason, I am beyond thankful that I don't live in a situation like that. Truly. So, am I a child of immigrants? Well, the answer to that is yes. Immigration is part of my family. I am the first child of my parents to be born in the U.S. And you know what? I am also beyond thankful for that. I mean, how could I not be? I could have been born anywhere in the world. But thanks to my parents and their choices, I was born here in the land of freedom and liberty. And I cannot fathom sometimes how blessed my life has been for like the majority of it. And I am thankful for, what I've experienced in this country, up until this point in my life. I have a beautiful wife. I have 3 beautiful kids. It is really by the grace of God that I feel like, life has been good for me. But I do see the sacrifice and hard work that my parents put in order for my family to have a good life. And like I said many times, I am thankful for that. My parents provided an amazing example to live by. But what was my experience? In other words, what did I witness my family do while being immigrants? Well, all I have is my memory, so I will do my best to remember. For starters, I do recall my parents and big brother becoming U.S. citizens. If you ask me, that must have been a major step in the right direction for their goals. I can vaguely remember going to a citizenship ceremony and watching my mom, dad, and big brother pledge their allegiance to the United States, as well as there being a large group of other people too. I mean, it looked like a graduation ceremony, from what I can remember. And I remember everyone was waving their miniature U.S. flags. And, I knew it was a special event. Not only was it a special event, but it was an important event. So my family became citizens, which is a big part of my family's immigration story. And this fact plays a role on where I land, opinion-wise, on the current protests we're seeing in the country. My parents acknowledged that to live in this land, you have to be part of it. You have to have some kind of allegiance to it. And there's a special word that seems not to be so popular anymore, but that word is assimilation. And I can tell that my parents assimilated to the United States. How do I know this? Well, a couple of things come to mind. For one, my dad legally changed his name to Thomas from the Spanish translation Tomás, which, I haven't asked yet, but I assume the reason for that was to quote unquote fit in more with the American culture of the United States. What I mean by that is that this is an English-speaking place, so if you want to fit in or assimilate, then you learn the language. Another thing that I remember seeing is, and this is kind of funny, is it's pictures of my mom. And for the record, my mom has passed away, and I do miss her dearly. But I remember seeing pictures of my mom before I was born, and she had this bizarre platinum blonde hair in one of these pictures, which I knew for a fact my mom was not naturally blonde, but with a little bit of logic and reason, I have come to the conclusion that my mother in her younger years, living in the States in the 80s, probably wanted to fit in with the main American population, which still to this day, about 40 years later, the U.S. has a majority of white Caucasian, population. And that's simply what America is. So it makes sense that my mom felt the need to assimilate or to be like the people of this land. And of course, Hollywood was a big part of the culture back then, not so much now, as I think Hollywood is dying, but that's a topic for another time. But everyone wanted to be like the stars of Hollywood, think Michelle Pfeiffer, just as an example. Which, it's understandable that we want to look like the Hollywood stars because, we are mimetic creatures. We want to copy those around us that we consider ideal or beautiful. But yeah, I could see my parents wanting to assimilate to the United States in the manners that they chose to do so. And you know what? There's nothing wrong about that. But, not only that, I remember my family talking about my mom going to adult school to learn English. And I think my parents had computer software programs to learn English because, once again, they wanted to assimilate. But not just learning the language, but, also I would say going to church, in my mind, is another form of assimilating. I mean, Christianity is undoubtedly part of the history of the United States, or at least, the belief in the Judeo-Christian God, as it is mentioned in the preamble in the Declaration of Independence with the phrase, endowed by their creator. Creator, obviously meaning God as the creator. So my parents raising their kids going to church is without a doubt a very American thing to do. To want family to be raised with godly values, principles, and traditions. That's just as American as apple pie. But speaking about American traditions, I also remember celebrating the 4th of July with fireworks and firecrackers. And we always had fun blowing stuff up and, when we were growing up. Once again, assimilating to the country. And no, we didn't do Cinco de Mayo because, one, I'm not Mexican. And two, no one knows what Cinco de Mayo is. Okay, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But Christmas, yes, obviously we did a more American approach to Christmas. But also, the Latin traditions as well for Christmas. So that was kind of a blend, I suppose, of that holiday. We celebrated Christmas the religious way, the Santa Claus-y way, and the Hispanic-y way. On the 24th of December, most Latin countries do Christmas on the 24th, and not just the 25th. So it was quite nice. We had a well-rounded Christmas here, growing up. But I'm getting off point here. But the point is assimilation. You want to become part of the land that you're choosing to live in. And yes, that is, in my perspective, an important thing. I mean, just an example. If I decided to move to Italy, I promise you, I would want to learn the language. I would want to learn the traditions, learn the culture, eat their food, and try to become part of Italy. But I don't want to be part of Italy. I don't want to move there. So, all that stuff, I'll learn about it, but I don't want to be like the Italians. So anyway, I was born here in America. So I grew up being American. And I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of. So, am I an immigrant? No. But I am a child of immigrants. And I could proudly say that, as I said before, I'm thankful my parents decided to raise me and my brothers here because, well, it's been a good life, Not perfect, but really good. And, I want to pass that experience on to my kids. Second question. And this question, I was actually really asked this question last year. And I will answer it honestly. This was the question. Here's the question. Andrew, are you afraid to be profiled by immigration enforcement and be deported? Andrew, they're deporting based on what people look like, and you look like someone that they would go after. Well, I guess it's true that the people being deported look like me because, let's face it, illegal aliens aren't walking around with picket signs that say, I'm an illegal on it. And, Biden left the southern border wide open during his presidency. So what do people from the south of the border look like? They look like me. And where are they all going to? Oh, yeah, that's right. The sanctuary cities. Good thinking, class. That's using your old noggin. Yes. Most of the people being deported look like me. And Los Angeles is a sanctuary city. So is ICE going to come over here and look for people? Probably. I think they already have. They're probably going to come again. But am I afraid? No. Okay. I digress. I'm getting off script here. But this is what I answered when I got asked that question. If I was afraid that I would be deported, I said this. No. Being deported has not once crossed my mind. I don't think that there's a possibility that I could be deported. Why? Well, for starters, I'm an American citizen. I was born here in the city of Torrance. I went to school here, graduated here, worked several jobs, and surprise, surprise, have not committed any crimes. I know, crazy, right? That I'm not out here doing crimes all day, every day, and thinking about the next crime I want to commit. Insane. But jokes aside. Also, I married someone who is an American citizen too. So that would make me a citizen too, kind of like insurance. JK. But also, let's see, I'm a mailman. I have a job. I have a family. I don't beat my wife like Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I have a social security number that I didn't steal. I mean, you tell me, what reason should I have to be deported? Because I can't think of any. Okay. I think I answered that question to the fullest extent. But the final question that I'm addressing on this podcast is this. Andrew, do you support what's going on with ICE and them raiding cities and rounding up people like animals and sending them away, locking them up? Do you really support all that? ICE just killed a woman, Andrew. How could you support that? Is that what you voted for? Short answer, wait for it. Wait for it. Yes. All right. Don't turn off this podcast just yet. Don't turn off this podcast just to put on a podcast about serial killers instead, okay? Please don't. Look, I'll make it make sense, okay? Okay, I'll make it make sense, I promise. And here's how. First, a nation is defined by its borders. If you don't have a border, you don't have a nation. If you do have a border, then you must have some kind of protection at the border and a way to know, and you need to know or have a way to know who's entering the border. Just like If you have a house, you don't leave your front door open at night while you sleep with a lawn sign that says, "Help yourself to the fridge." No. Just like your house or apartment, you allow people to come in, usually people that you know. Same thing with the country. You want to know who's coming in. The same reason why you travel the world with a passport. People need to know who you are. And this is not going to be a popular thing to say, although it's true. But there are good people and there are bad people in the world. There is good and there is evil. And, good people do good things. Evil people do evil things. Okay. I've come to believe that people are mostly bad. Okay. There are some people that think that, people are mostly good. We're mostly good people. And I'm like, no. I think people, human nature, instinctively, we're mostly bad. Why do I think that? Well, because if we were mostly good, then we wouldn't need so many laws. That's just common sense. So since there are bad people all around, then you want a government to protect its citizens from outside enemies. Because if you can protect people, you can live freely. So, do I think immigration is a good thing? Of course I do. I believe we need it. We need immigration. But we need it when we need it. However, we have to know who you are and what your intentions are. What are your skills? Oh, you're a teacher who speaks Spanish? Oh, okay. You can come into our country and, be a Spanish teacher. Oh, you're a doctor? Oh, all right. We can use you for sure. Oh, you're a gardener? Well, we don't really need more of those, but the grass still grows where you're from. Okay, that was a joke. That last one was a joke. Okay. Was that joke too harsh? Let me know in the comments, and I'll fix the bad jokes if I have to. Anyway, yeah. So we need to know who you are and what you are doing here in the U.S. And that goes for any country. But what's the problem? Well, as I mentioned, Joe Biden left the southern border wide open during his presidency. That's 4 years of open border. And, almost literally, he didn't do anything about it. We don't know exactly how many entered, but we know it was way too many. And, that's illegal. That's illegal. So everyone that's coming in should do so. If you're coming in, you should do so. Wait for it, legally. That's my point here. If you don't do it the legal way, you're breaking the law, and that's not really helping your case. Now, do I understand why they do it? Of course I do. Yeah, some are seeking asylum. I get that, but you can't just come into the country, say I'm seeking asylum, and then whoop-de-doo, you're in. It's kind of like that joke in The Office where Michael Scott hears some bad news that his branch is going under, and he walks out and goes, "I declare bankruptcy." And then one of the office associates is like, Michael Scott, you can't just declare bankruptcy like that. You can't just declare you're seeking asylum and then think that's your ticket in. Like, you have to prove it. You got to do paperwork and all this stuff through the port of entry. And, there's a process. Do it the legal way. That's all I'm saying here. But yes, I understand why they do it. Okay. I'm not oblivious. However, the other big problem are, the sanctuary cities throughout the states. Now sanctuary cities are like exclusively in Democrat-run states. And basically, sanctuary cities offer certain protections to the undocumented migrants. which, one, they have already committed the basic crime of crossing the border illegally, and two, let's say they are working, means that the chances they are fraudulently using a social security number that they've stolen, the chances are that's very high, which is another crime in and of itself. And, two wrongs don't make a right, so it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer why a lot of these lawbreakers find refuge in sanctuary cities. So we can reasonably say we know where the illegal migrants are. And not only that, we know that some of them are gang members of foreign nations. And a level-headed person would say, yeah, we don't want them here. But, the Democrats, they say, well, they need to be treated with due process, yada, yada. But we all know illegal immigrants are not citizens. So, no, they don't have the same exact rights as actual citizens. But anyway, I really don't want to go into all of that. The point is, we know where they are. We know where they can be found. And we know they're not walking around with signs that say, I'm illegal here. And we know Democrat-run cities do not want to work with the Trump administration and hand them over to the feds. So yeah, immigration enforcement has to do their job and get these people out of the country. Just like police officers have to detain drunk drivers, ICE has to detain people that don't belong here. Now, I have to say, this is where it does get tricky for me, okay? It does get a little hazy. Because, yes, I understand immigrants come here for a better future and all that, just like my parents did. I get that. I know they get that it's risky business to do so, and it's not a glamorous trail to blaze. But at the same time, a country that just allows whoever into the country will be met with bad people eventually. And we did see a lot of that under the Biden administration. There are a lot of innocent Americans killed by illegal immigrants, such as Laken Riley. That's such a sad story. Also, it's unfair for illegal migrants to cut the line, so to speak, on people doing it the right, legal way. And it's unfair because, well, they're taking away jobs from actual Americans, making it harder for American citizens to find good paying jobs because illegal immigrants tend to do the work for less pay, which it's not good for anyone. It's bad for the economy, basically. Plus, if they get on government welfare, it depletes the resources that should be going to tax-paying citizens, and instead go to undeserving people, which, that used to be called stealing. And I don't have to tell you what I think about stealing, but yeah, that's not good for the morale of the country. So, three main solutions that politicians give for this immigration dilemma, or this immigration frustration. I hope that phrase gets popular because of me. It's always the same. Okay, the solutions that are proposed. It's either A, amnesty for those already here. B, deport every single undocumented person, period. Or C, deport the criminal aliens, as in hardcore criminals, the ones that are simply just living to the hardcore criminal, but leave the ones that are just living to support their families and not committing continual crimes. Those can stay. But the really, really bad criminals, yeah, the ones that are doing all kinds of bad stuff, yeah, get those one out. But the nicer ones can stay. Now, out of those three options, I personally land on that third option, if I'm being completely honest, which Trump kind of alluded to that, where, he didn't want to touch the farm workers. But I do understand that most ultra MAGA type folks, like, the ones that are like far to the right, they would say, deport every last one of them. every single one, which, to be fair, the law does allow for that. And a case can be made that that would be the most fair option. But, I do see the amnesty view, it's nice and all, but, the U.S. has done that before. It should have been a one and done thing. If we keep doing that, just every, 10 years, 20 years, give amnesty to whoever's here, then, it's like you're saying, if you can sneak in here, eventually we'll let you in and let you stay. And that's not really upholding the law in my opinion. But I do like the idea of, deport the really bad ones, like the drug traffickers, human traffickers, murderers, the face tattooed, Satan worshiping gangsters. Yeah, like those, like no questions asked. Get those out of here. But the ones that have committed like zero continuous crimes, and maybe they can have some kind of resume or some references that could vouch for them. So that shows that they haven't killed, stolen, committed any civil crimes against any citizen. Perhaps, maybe, give them a chance. Oh, and, and I like this idea here. Hear me out. Let's say we find one of these illegal immigrants and they say something to you like, look, guys, I'm sorry I was in your country illegally. But I only did it because the United States is the best country in the world, hands down. This place is amazing, not only for the freedoms that it grants to its people, but all the good that it's done for the rest of the world too. Like that's the only reason why I came here legally. That's the only reason, I did it this way. I came over, the wrong way because, the United States is just so amazing. Now, like if, they caught someone, they said all that, and you could tell that they were being sincere, I would say, let that person stay. They love this country. That's good. That's good. But that's just me, and I don't make the rules. But let's wrap this up. I really don't want to hit that hour mark. I'm trying to keep it short. Do nations like the United States need to uphold their laws? Yes. In the Bible, the book of Romans, chapter 13, verses 1 through 2, it says the following: "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves." So, what I believe the Bible is saying here is that God put certain governments in place, and we ought to obey the government laws. And that's not to say all the laws are good, but we should do our best to obey those laws. And as Christians, we should vote into power people who would make moral laws that are true to God's moral standards. But laws should be upheld according to the Bible. So if any country has immigration laws, those laws should be kept. Immigration should be done legally because it protects all of its citizens. And America is a Christian nation with Christian influences, as much as both the radical right and radical left don't like that fact. I believe that laws should reflect the morality of God from the Bible. That's my opinion. Maybe I'll dive deep into that subject for a different episode in the future, but let's continue. Are ICE officers domestic terrorists? Like certain Democrat politicians are saying. No, No, they're no more a domestic terrorist than a police officer is a domestic terrorist when you get pulled over for speeding. I mean, there are laws of the land, and law enforcement must enforce the law. And ICE officers are just doing their job. People that shouldn't be here shouldn't be here. And it's not unloving to say that. I mean, yes, we should treat everyone with love and respect. I'm not saying don't treat people with love and respect. But yeah, they should go back to their country, to, the country where they have citizenship, and come back the legal way. The law is a teacher, and some people have to learn the hard way. I mean, you just can't waltz into this country whenever you want. It's a country won't work that way. It won't function correctly. Really quickly about Renee Good. I know I did a satire on that whole situation, but on a more serious note, did Renee Good deserve to die by being shot by the officers? I'm pretty sure everyone listening to this podcast knows what I'm talking about. The video went extremely viral. But did she deserve to die? No. It's absolutely sad that she did die. It was a terrible event that unfolded and very horrific. However, there's no dispute. It was a justified killing. If you drive your car towards a law officer, you should expect to get shot. Okay, for reals. But if you buy into this wild idea that ICE is a domestic terrorist group, as Democrat politicians and radical leftists keep pushing, it's going to drive people, no pun intended, it's going to drive people to feel the need to drive their cars into ICE agents, which unfortunately, when Renee Good's lesbian lover gave the order to drive, baby, drive, that was audibly captured on video. And then, and you also hear in the video, the lesbian lover says that she was confused to learn that the gun had real bullets. She's like, oh, why did you use real bullets? It's like, really? You don't know that guns have bullets? But that's what she said. And, what happens is when protesters start listening to this sort of rhetoric that, Trump is Hitler and that democracy is under threat in America, this is the kind of thing that happens. This is the water boiling over because, these protesters listening to their, their favorite politicians, the protesters get a little deranged. They forget that we live in reality. They forget that guns have bullets. They forget that cars being driven into law enforcement will lead law enforcement to shoot to shoot you. I don't know why I laughed at that. And believe that, they believe that the lies that ICE officers are terrorists. They lose the foresight to think. They should just think clearly and think, hey, maybe I shouldn't obstruct law officers and drive into them. If you live in reality, you will learn, you would know, rather, yeah, I shouldn't drive into law enforcement. But yeah, people get deranged. People get delusional, I might add. So, similar to the, defend the police crowd. I mean, the defund the police movement that happened. It started during Barack Obama's presidency, which, turns out if you defund the police, there is less law enforcement, therefore more crimes in the city, has the reverse effect of what it's intended to happen. Just think about I live in California, all the smash and grab stuff that was happening. People were getting away with smashing and grabbing. If they kept their their amount of goods being stolen under a certain amount of money, then, they won't go to jail. They'll just get a slap on the wrist. So what happened? More smashing and grabbing. And then what happened next? Well, now if you wanted to go to CVS and get yourself a stick of deodorant, well, it was locked up. You had to ask a store associate to, hey, can you unlock the cage so I can get a stick of deodorant and a toothpaste? But, it's what's going to happen. You defund the police, you're going to get less law enforcement, more crimes. If you don't want ICE to do their jobs, well, it's going to be more bad people out on the streets. Or I shouldn't say bad people, just people that shouldn't be here. But yeah, as long as Democrat politicians keep telling ICE, people, mixing up my words again, as long as Democrat politicians keep telling people that ICE are domestic terrorists, more protesters that are irrational in their thinking and react based on immediate, uncontrolled emotion, well, I predict more people will die. And I don't want that to happen. So instead, I would urge politicians to tell their citizens, hey, just let ICE do their job, okay? Don't obstruct. Just leave them alone. Let them do their thing. Because really, that's the only way to guarantee everyone to be safe and no one else will lose their life. So, is this what the majority of America voted for? Well, yeah, that's politics for you. Joe Biden let millions of illegal immigrants into the country, and Donald Trump is just making them, go back to where they belong. Every country deports. Every U.S. president of my lifetime has deported. Deportations are nothing new. The only difference is Donald Trump is, now allowing incentivized self-deportations. And surprisingly, that is actually working too. And how sweet is that? The White House was offering a free plane ticket plus $3,000 for those willing to self-deport. How nice is that? Man, jeez. I should be angry at that, but man, what a sweet deal. Almost makes me want to self-deport. Just for the $3,000, I'll tell them I'm Mexican, visit Mexico, then sneak back into the U.S. like nothing ever happened and be $3,000 richer. Okay, I'm kidding. And I'm kidding because the U.S. economy is actually improving thanks to, America voting for a competent president to be in the White House. Anyway, I think I spent way too much time jibber-jabbering on this issue. I started fumbling my words at the end there. You know what? I'm just gonna end it here. That's enough. I answered the questions. You know what I think. You know where I land on the issues. Now, there is so much more I can say. The news moves too fast. And, I blame myself for staying up to date with the news. It just, too much stuff is happening. But you know what? Whatever else I have to say, I'll save it for another time. So what did we learn today? Don't drive your car into law enforcement officers if you're desiring to, live a long, lustrous life. Don't be a criminal, okay? That's another thing we learned today. Obey the laws of the land. And lastly, most importantly, go to church, read your Bible, pray, okay? Have a happy new year and keep up the faith.